What is poppin' YouTube? Bringing you 5 Dynasty sleepers today. First guy we're starting off with is Josh Downs, Indianapolis Colts wide receiver. Right now on Keep Trade Cut, wide receiver 46, overall 113. When we look at Josh Downs, of course had a really great connection with Gardner Minshew once Anthony Richardson ended up getting injured. But my thing is with Josh Downs, of course, there is the concern that the Colts might draft someone to bring someone else into this wide receiver room. But right now, if we're looking at it, Michael Pittman Jr. getting resigned is probably one of the better things that could happen to the Colts, because now we know Josh Downs is the clear wide receiver 2 at this current moment. And if we look at his overall game log, I mean, started off the season kind of slow, but then he had a week stretch. Week 5, 15 fantasy points. Week 6, 13 fantasy points. Week 7, 23 fantasy points. Week 8, 14 fantasy points, where it was some killer points. I mean, he was a waiver wire darling in your redraft leagues. Now, did he ever cross 14 points again the rest of the season? No, he did not. Did he finish as a wide receiver 51 on a points per game basis with only 9.2 fantasy points per game? Yes, he did. But 98 targets, 68 receptions in your rookie year for a wide receiver. Wasn't drafted in round 1, wasn't drafted in round 2, but was drafted in round 3 to the Colts. I know he's 5'9", 171, but he's a perfect slot wide receiver. I'm excited for Josh Downs going into year 2. And like I said, I know maybe not the prototypical sleeper where you're finding him. He's not a stash. He's not a waiver wire guy. If you can go trade for Josh Downs, add Josh Downs, I think he's a great sleeper to be adding to your Dynasty fantasy football rosters. And I've been trying to get some Josh Downs on my teams, trying to fill out those edge pieces, because as we're going for championships, as we're rebuilding, Josh Downs fits both of those categories as a guy that I'm super excited to see. His value really can only go up from here when you're at overall 113. Can it go down? Yes, it can. But when you're this young, when we've seen the flashes start to appear, let's buy into this guy. Because if we were honestly looking at it, I mean, JSN, Jordan Addison, Zay Flowers as the top 3 wide receivers for the rookies. Josh Downs is right there as wide receiver 4 and honestly performed at points better than JSN last season. So, like some Josh Downs, first sleeper that I would be targeting. My next guy I would be targeting as a sleeper for Dynasty Fantasy Football is going to be Chuba Hubbard, running back for the Carolina Panthers. The Panthers were absolutely awful last year. Everyone knew that. We saw Bryce Young. Wasn't great. Performance wasn't great. But Chuba Hubbard really overtook Miles Sanders as the lead running back in this Carolina backfield. RB33 on a points per game basis. Now you're going to send me, Caleb, Chuba Hubbard, RB33. That's not great. Well, that's why he's a sleeper for me. They're not all gems. They're not all Bijan Robinson or Breece Hall. But he did have some games where he had 10 fantasy points in week 2. He had 20 fantasy points in week 12. He had 22 fantasy points in week 13. And when you actually look at the second half of the season when he really started going, 20 fantasy points, 22 fantasy points, 11 fantasy points, 12, 12, 11, 11. Chuba Hubbard started to perform. Now, there is the concern. Of course, you still got Miles Sanders in that stupid contract on the Carolina Panthers roster. But then what are they going to do in the draft? My thing is, with them not having their first round pick from trading it in that Chicago Bears trade last year, I look at the Carolina Panthers and I don't really think they're going to be able to address the running back position, which if this offense is going to take that next step under Dave Canales coming over from the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, we saw Rachaad White be an absolute PPR monster. Now, I'm not saying Chuba Hubbard has the same type of reception upside, but he has had 4 reception type games last season. If we can kind of start to see those metrics start to take shape, I mean, he was RB9 on carries last year. So if he can kind of even maintain that same workload in a more efficient offense, I think Chuba Hubbard is an absolute sleeper that you should be targeting. Right now on Keep Trade Cut, Chuba Hubbard is going off the board as RB38 overall 170. When we're looking at players around him, I mean, Devin Singletary, Austin Eckler, Chuba, Chase Brown, Chuba Hubbard. Going in the same range as guys like Devin Singletary, Curtis Samuel. Chuba Hubbard, he's a really great sleeper for me, and I would definitely be targeting him if you need to trade, if you want to take an upside shot, or if you have Chuba Hubbard. Feels pretty great because I have a sleeper heading into 2024. My next guy we're going to be talking about is Zach Charbonnet, running back for the Seattle Seahawks. And I might be the biggest Zach Charbonnet dynasty creator on YouTube, and it's for good reason. Zach Charbonnet drafted 2nd round out of UCLA, and Zach Charbonnet could not overtake Kenneth Walker this last season. But when Kenneth Walker wasn't playing, only finished as running back 28, running back 18, 10.2 fantasy points, 12.9 fantasy points, 16.9 fantasy points. Like, it wasn't really absolutely high-end type production from a running back that you would be seeing getting the bell cow. When you look at his metrics, nothing really sticks out as something like, you know, running back 38 on a snap share where he only played 47% of snaps, 108 carries, 40 targets, 22 red zone touches. I mean, Caleb, why are you saying that he's a sleeper? Well, new coaching staff for the Seattle Seahawks. They didn't draft Zach Charbonnet. They also didn't draft Ken Walker. So as much as we see Ken Walker up the dynasty board, Zach Charbonnet is currently not being valued like that. RB 28 right now, overall player 131. Players around Zach Charbonnet: Alvin Kamara, Zamir White, Blake Corum, Nick Chubb. Now, if you need instant production, of course, go Alvin Kamara. But there's a lot of question marks around the value adjacent running backs. I think Zach Charbonnet is being slept on as someone that could definitely take that next step into year 2 in the Seattle Seahawks offense. So definitely think he's a good sleeper. Let me know down below what you think of Zach Charbonnet. Are you buying the hype, or are you just saying that they overdrafted him as a second round pick? Let me know down below. My next player we're going to be talking about is Jerome Ford. Now, Jerome Ford had to take a bigger step in the offense last year alongside Kareem Hunt once Nick Chubb ended up going down. Finished as the RB 25 overall, 12.4 fantasy points per game, RB 14 on weighted opportunities. The Cleveland Browns ran the 4th most plays in the NFL for their running backs, RB 23 on carries, RB 14 on targets. And you'd be saying to me, after kind of everything that we just saw last year for Jerome Ford, especially with the reports that Nick Chubb isn't going to be coming back fully healthy, being like, Caleb, there's no way that Jerome Ford's a sleeper. Well, the Cleveland Browns signed Deontay Foreman, who we've seen be a very capable both fantasy football running back, but also real life NFL running back, into this Cleveland Browns backfield. You also got Nyheim Hines, who signed this offseason. So you're looking at Jerome Ford, and honestly, if we understand that Nick Chubb's recovery is probably struggling a little bit because he tore his ACL, his MCLs, a lot of L's, then Jerome Ford probably would get boosted up the rankings. But with the fact that they signed Deontay Foreman, that they signed Nyheim Hines, there's a lot of question marks around Deshaun Watson leading this Cleveland Browns offense. RB 41 feels absolutely incredible on keep trade cut, when, like I said, he's behind guys like Devin Singletary, Austin Eckler, ahead of guys like a Keaton Mitchell, a Gus Edwards. Now, Gus Edwards definitely probably should be appropriately ranked a little bit above. Like I said, I'm recording this. We'll see what happens with Gus Edwards' overall value on keep trade cut. But Jerome Ford right now feels like a pretty good sleeper, that if you need some running back depth on your team, you need a high upside shot, Jerome Ford as your RB4, as your RB5 on a dynasty roster feels pretty good if you can get that happening. Now, my final sleeper that I'm bringing to you today is Michael Wilson Jr. And I swear I had Michael Wilson Jr. as a sleeper last year before redraft season, and freaking every week I'd make like a video where I talk about the next breakout. And it felt like Michael Wilson was going to break out, because in week 3 he had 10 fantasy points. In week 4 he had 26 fantasy points. When he had that 26 fantasy point day versus San Francisco in week 4, I was like, ooh, he broke out, baby. He back. Well, that did not end up happening for Michael Wilson, where really just had a very mediocre rest of the regular season until week 17, week 18, put up 15 fantasy points each of those weeks to end the season with only 8.8 fantasy points per game, putting him as wide receiver 57. 58 targets, 38 receptions, wasn't great. And then there was always the worry. The Arizona Cardinals are sitting at 4. They're going to draft Marvin Harrison Jr. Like, what's going to happen? Well, there were the question marks around Hollywood Brown. And Hollywood Brown signs with the Kansas City Chiefs, leaving the whole entire Arizona Cardinals open for business. They didn't sign any big free agents. And we're looking at Michael Wilson Jr., currently sitting on this roster, as the wide receiver 1. Now, they are going to be drafting and bringing in a ton of wide receiver help through the draft. So we're going to have to see what happens there. But if they do end up drafting Marvin Harrison Jr. at 4, or maybe Marvin Harrison Jr. goes 3 to the Patriots, and then they end up with Malik Neighbors or Rome Odunze, still, Michael Wilson Jr. is still going to be sitting as a wide receiver 2, which last year he was competing with targets with not only Hollywood Brown, but also you had Rondell Moore, but also Greg Dortch. Now, Greg Dortch is still there. So maybe you're going to say Greg Dortch is better than Michael Wilson, and Greg Dortch is actually the true wide receiver 1 right now for the Arizona Cardinals. Doesn't matter. They got rid of Rondell Moore. They got rid of Hollywood Brown. So it frees up Michael Wilson to take on a bigger role in year 2 out of the University of Stanford. So I absolutely love some Michael Wilson as a sleeper heading into 2024. Like I said, right now on Keep Trade Cut, he is wide receiver 62, overall 168. So all the way down the board, behind like a Mike Williams. Ahead of DeAndre Hopkins, that feels a little wrong, but still around like Curtis Samuel, Josh Palmer, Gabe Davis. So maybe you're like, that's a little high for me, Caleb. I'd prefer some of those guys around him. For me, Michael Wilson's worth the shot in this Kyler Murray-led offense. I think Michael Wilson's a pretty good sleeper. And I've been kind of riding the Michael Wilson trade for the last year, so excited to see what he does in year 2. So let me know what you guys think of these sleepers down below. Bringing new content each and every day this week. Honestly, guys, I'm trying to put out the best Dynasty Fantasy Football content I can. So hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. We'll be back with another video tomorrow. If you haven't checked out my video from yesterday talking about young wide receivers I am looking to trade away, tune into that right here, and I'll catch you on the next one. Peace.